Hi, everybody. Welcome to our third Fireside Chat Series. We are super excited today because we have Jennifer Hyman, the co-founder and CEO of Rent the Runway, here with us. There are so many topics that we're interested in discussing and chatting with Jenn about. But before I do that, I do want to just set this up for those of you who are attending this for the first time. As you know, we are doing a series of fireside chats with some key business leaders, as well as just thinkers who we think embody the anthropological spirit in either the training they have or the work they do day to day. Jenn certainly embodies that, and we'll get into that in today's session. This is our third in a series of installments. And really the focus of this is to try and bring forward the idea of how meaning is changing in culture around topics, ideas, issues, trends that all of us care about, that our businesses play in, and to really try to unpack. So use these sessions to try to unpack how meaning is changing, why it might be changing, and how organizations, leaders, businesses are adapting to these changes. And in many cases, sort of having the foresight to predict them and sort of lead the charge, so to speak. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Ujwal, the co-founder and CEO of MotivBase. I'm also a cultural anthropologist. As many of you know, we are a company that services about 130 organizations globally. And we primarily work with organizations at the front end of innovation. So we help leaders who are making decisions that range from acquisitions to net new product and brand launches. And our job really is to help them study and decode meaning, measure how meaning is changing, and predict where it might be headed so that organizations can make decisions knowing the implicit outcomes of the things they do. I am so excited today because not only is Jennifer an incredible leader and an incredible speaker, but also runs a company that is valued at $1 billion. She is also part of a group of leaders that is still sadly a small community of women leaders, women that run companies of this size. It is not only an incredible achievement, but the work she's doing is not just helping propel her company forward, but the work is also helping set the stage for more women leaders to emerge in this space. So there's just so much to talk to Jenn about. So I'm super excited to have her. Her accolades are wide-ranging, and instead of focusing on all the sort of the accolades she's achieved, I think what we're going to talk about more is try to get inside her mind a little bit today, and try to think about and try to unpack what are the issues, the topics, the ideas that are really top of mind for her, both in the context of her business, but also just generally in the context of just being a business leader, thinking about issues that affect all of us in our lives, whether it's, as far as business is concerned, but also in general in society at large. Jenn, thank you for
Hi,
being here.
I'm excited. I love cultural anthropology. This would be like one of my alternative careers if I wasn't CEO of Rent the Runway.
I love that. And so Jenn, I thought we could, just to get into the conversation, I was watching one of your interviews on YouTube. And in that interview, you talked about your upbringing in a very diverse community, I believe in the state of New York. And you talked about how that diversity really helped shape your life experiences at a young age and helped you in particular realize that the same thing, the same idea could mean different things to different people. I just thought it might be good to kind of start there just to set the stage a little bit.
Yeah, so I grew up in a town called New Rochelle, which is a really unique town in that it has diversity from over 88 countries, and it also has extreme diversity economically within its school system. So the high school that I went to had everything from projects to mansions in the town. And they didn't track us into honors classes, or kind of until we were in 10th or 11th grade, depending on the subject. So for the first year to year and a half of school, you were really in classes with the most diverse set of people that I've actually ever been in touch with in my life. And it was just, from whatever background you're from, to really understand how your own values are affecting your opinions. There's nothing like that. Like, you're reading a book and in a 11th grade class on literature, and you realize like that book has fundamentally different meanings to people based on where they're from. And I think that the major thing that my high school experience kind of taught me was the differences in economic reality. So whereas I come from an environment where I was able, from a financial standpoint, to spend my afternoons after class doing extracurricular activities, many of my own peers were involved in jobs that were helping to support their families, not just, for extra kind of pocket cash. So that just really, the economic diversity of the school impacted me dramatically, and I think was one of the subconscious reasons why I started Rent the Runway.
Right. And, I do find, especially in a lot of the corporate work we do, it doesn't exactly come naturally for most people to even take a step back to think about the fact that even the same word might have a multitude of meanings to different people. And Jen, I'll share this example with you. I have a lot of family in India, and while India was sort of reeling from the second wave of the pandemic, there's a Washington Post journalist that tweeted a photo of an open air crematorium, and it was a shocking photo, and she used the word stunning. And of course, technically, she didn't say anything wrong, because stunning, as she later tweeted when she was getting backlash, she later tweeted saying, "Hey, look at the dictionary. Stunning means to stun." So I didn't say anything wrong. I meant shocking. But the thing is, people got so upset about it. And people got upset because they said it doesn't matter that the technical definition is to stun. Most of the time when people use that word, they use it in the context of something that's beautiful, like stunning places to visit on Earth and things like that. Um, and I think a lot of people don't think about that naturally, innately, in not just the language they use, but the things they think about for their business. Um, I would just love to hear from you on that.
So I'll give like one example in high school that actually did frame a piece of Rent the Runway. So every high school in the US has a prom, and it's obviously, there's a lot of cultural resonance with the idea of a prom, but I will tell you that the relative importance of the prom was dramatically different based on the economic class that you were from. So it was way more important as a moment if you were from a lower economic class, because those students and those families believed that this was going to be one of the central moments to celebrate and showcase your life. And that I had, friends of mine in my class who were spending an inordinate amount on their prom dresses and their makeup for prom and their hair for prom, from families that like really weren't making much money. And, the way that I was thinking about it was more rational. Like, why would you ever spend that amount on a prom dress if this is literally putting your family into debt? And the way that they were thinking about it is, because we have fewer moments that we get to just go and like celebrate and remember, and these are the photographs that we're going to take, and the ways that we're going to remember our lives, and they therefore put more spend into that event kind of on a percentage basis. And part of the notion of democratizing access to the fashion industry was based around kind of what I saw of like people making these decisions that were putting them into kind of difficult financial situations because of the fact that it felt important to show up at an event that was meaningful, feeling like the best version of yourself and showing up with confidence. And people were willing to spend for those emotional reasons. In fact, if you think about the fashion industry, which is a $500 billion a year industry in the US alone and $2.4 trillion globally, the whole industry is based around emotion. The average American has gone from consuming, meaning buying 40 articles of clothing per year in 1990 to 70 articles of clothing per year in 2020. Now, there's no rational reason why the number of items have gone up. We consume as much as we do in clothing because it is emotional, because walking into the room in a new outfit gives us confidence. It makes us feel like a different version of ourselves. It enables us to change. And so that is what drives this massive, massive industry.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you know, as we transition into that, it's a good segue to talk a little bit about your company itself in terms of, because you know, sitting as an outsider observing, if I put the anthropological lens onto it, what I think is really fascinating is how you have managed to change a lot of the meanings around designer fashion. You know, in the past, one may think about designer fashion as something that is perhaps either inaccessible. Perhaps it is, you know, one might think it's a bit hoity-toity. It's a bit scary to dabble in that world. But somehow, you know, you've managed to successfully change that in a way where, you know, the middle class, the upper middle class can look at a piece of designer clothing and say, yeah, this is for me. Why shouldn't it be for me? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Just curious about how you think about that and the sort of the broader purpose you guys play in this space.
Yeah. So the central thesis that I had when I launched Rent the Runway was that experiences were going to become more important than ownership. And that if you were given the ability to access or subscribe in a category, that as a consumer, you would take it. And this would lead to rapid disruption in how we consumed almost every category. And we've seen that movement over the last decade across media, music, hospitality, transportation towards access over ownership. We also, it was also based on a belief that luxury was being redefined. Luxury used to mean basically elitism. Luxury used to mean this group can afford something and this larger group cannot. And that's what makes something a luxury product. Now, luxury, I thought 10 years ago that luxury would change to mean that a wider set of values, and those values could cross to themes like the heritage of a specific brand. Luxury could mean sustainability. Luxury could mean providing an experience to a consumer. But I thought that this notion that luxury equaled elitism was just outdated. And so the combination of providing women with access to a closet in the cloud was really accomplishing both notions of letting her experience fashion without having to make a lifelong commitment to it, and really bringing the brands in as partners to help them redefine, you know, what their brands meant in the world.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, you know, when you initially started to build your company, I mean, I'm guessing you faced some amount of, or a fair bit of, maybe backlash is the wrong word, but certainly trepidation from the luxury industry. So how did you manage that during that time?
There was a healthy amount of skepticism over whether offering products up for rent would be cannibalistic. And
Mhm.
what we were able to show over time is that we were creating the most important discovery platform for fashion. That when you released people from the kind of notion that everything that they wore was something that they had to buy forever, and instead gave them the freedom to explore and have fun and change via a closet in the cloud, that what actually happened is that discovery went up dramatically. People were excited about trying new brands and new aesthetics and new colors and new trends. And that's exactly what the fashion industry actually wants.
Mhm.
So the only way to kind of lessen that skepticism was just acting and doing it and showing brands who were initially skeptical how this had worked with others who had signed on. So we were lucky enough to have convinced 30 brands to join us when we launched. And now we have over 700 designer partners a decade later, and we have 100% brand retention of all of those designers that we have worked with, really proving that this is one of their most important discovery engines for their brand.
That's incredible. Um, Jen, one of the common challenges we face, for example, when we work with retailers, especially clothing retailers, is a lot of them have built brands around, especially I would say in the mid tier or lower tiers, they've built their brands around creativity. And every one of these brands has a brief that says, yeah, we're all about giving people a way to be creative, to express themselves, to be who they are. And as a result, one of the challenges become that everybody kind of speaks the same language, right? And nobody chooses to take a step back to ask the question, what does creativity really mean to people? And where do we fit in? I'm just curious if that was a conversation that you had to have or continue to have.
Well, okay, I want to talk about like why I even started this. And first, in response to your question, I think that those companies need to hire like new marketing professionals and new advertising firms,
Yeah.
because it just is kind of a BS sort of thing. Okay, why? So 12 years ago, kind of my sister went in search of confidence before she was going to an event, and it put her into credit card debt. And
Mhm.
I had a recognition at that point that the closet was dead. The closet was this ubiquitous space in everyone's home. It was inefficient. It trapped an enormous amount of financial value. And even more, it was a representation of who you were in the past. Your closet is literally a museum to your past. Go through the items in your closet and you could probably tell a story. This is these are the jeans that fit me when I was in college. This is the top I wore on a first date with some guy I hated. Here's this dress that I wore to this event. Like, and the light bulb for me was, what if the closet were alive? And I thought about, what does that mean? And what that meant to me is it meant that the closet could change with you as your life changed and your mood changed and the weather changed and your style changed. And that ability for a closet to change would enable the widest amount of true self-expression. Because the reality is that we don't know who we're going to be 6 months from now or a year from now. So, let alone what we're going to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So, making people commit to purchasing an article of clothing that they don't know what the utility of that product is going to be does not enable the highest degree of self expression. What does happen when you purchase something and you know you have to keep it forever? Subconsciously, you make the more rational choice. Should I really purchase this top in red or should I get it in navy? I'll probably get a lot more use out of it if I get it in navy. Maybe I should buy the dress in black because then I could wear it to the wedding and the funeral. Like And we make those kinds of rational choices, and that is what has affected sell-through rates. Look at what sells in a store over the last few decades. Like, it's the color black, it's the color navy, it's silhouettes that people could justify having some rational utility for. And or the other thing that sells is all of the fashion, all of the editorial, all of the trendier stuff that you use for self-expression is sold via mass or fast fashion. So people will buy this, but they'll buy it on the cheap. So they'll buy the copycat version of this designer piece at Zara or at the Amazon or the Shine of the world. So I just think that we have to think about this industry being one of the few in the world that prior to Rent the Runway did not offer an ability for anything beyond either buy it and own it forever or you don't get to wear it.
Right.
About every other industry in the automobile industry, it's been literal decades that we had the option to lease cars, rent cars, for fractional periods of time. Uber is literally just letting us rent the car for the final 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
In the music industry, we've had the option to buy a single song, even at very low mass market price points for a very long period of time. So before there even was a Spotify. So this industry really started to change and offer the ability to have kind of more fractional usage just when Rent the Runway launched.
Right. Yeah, that's phenomenal. Uh, and when you were talking about this idea that my closet changes with me, that's exactly the type of narrative, that the type of meanings that we try to ask or get our clients to ask about, because ultimately there's always an opportunity to uncover something that may surprise us, something that may not already be, there may not already be 50 versions of it in the marketplace. And all the best things happen when we take a step back and ask, well, what does that mean? And that's interesting to me whenever that takes us to a slightly out of the blue, slightly out of the ordinary territory. Obviously, one of the questions that a lot of people are asking, just given the situation post-pandemic, or I guess pandemic 2.0 or whatever we call it, is how you're dealing with it. Obviously, it's
Calling it Pandemic 2.0, I've never heard about that.
pandemic 2.0 just because it seems like it is never ending. But obviously, a lot of the questions revolve around, given the challenges in the fashion and the retail industry, how are you guys dealing with the sort of, I guess, the forced changes? But one question in particular that I really loved was kind of asking the question through a forward-looking lens, as in, are there certain changes that you had wanted to do in the past that you could now push through because of what the pandemic has done? So just curious to hear a bit from you about that.
Yeah, so I think that it has changed so much in the consumer mindset. Prior to the pandemic, people were primarily using Rent the Runway to get dressed, to go to work, or to go out at night, or to go to special events. And then one way to look at 2020 on the negative end is we saw revenue slow, and so you could look at it as a year that was more difficult. But when I look at the revenue we did generate in 2020, we saw a vast percentage of our subscribers stay with us and change their basket entirely in terms of what they were renting from us. And they started renting at-home wear, loungewear, activewear, stuff that they can wear, when they were lounging around on the couch. And so all of the money that we made in 2020 was for use cases that had been really less than 5% of our use cases prior to that. So she expanded how she thinks about the service into a wider array of rationales because of the pandemic. Now, the other thing that shifted is, interestingly, because we've been locked away from the people that we love over the past year, I think that we will never again not appreciate our time with friends and family. We are going to appreciate our experiences even more than we ever have before. And this thesis that I had in 2008, that the experience economy would become prevalent across every way that we lived, I think COVID was like the final kick in the butt to make that permanent, because of the fact that we're never going to let another birthday go by that we don't celebrate. We're never going to, have a friend in town and not take that opportunity to see them. And we're seeing that right now in this dramatic reacceleration of our business, that people are not only renting the runway for use cases that they didn't originally come to us for, but they're planning for those use cases. So they are creating groupings of clothes to like go to brunch with friends, to celebrate birthdays, to go on vacations, things that were just kind of a normal part of life. I think people are putting new kind of appreciation and importance around. And I actually don't think that is going to go away anytime soon. I think it is a massive shift, especially because this has happened to everyone all over the world at the exact same time. So it is going to be, in my opinion, it's going to lead to one of the biggest changes in global mindset than we've ever experienced. Second thing that's happened, we've also all been trapped at home. Okay, so we've been staring at homes filled with stuff, at closets filled with stuff that we don't use. There has never been more proof of the futility of all the stuff that we've bought in the past, and how this culture of overconsumption that we have all over the world is not only completely unsustainable and has cost us a lot of money, but doesn't actually bring us real value. That wasn't what was driving our happiness or joy in the moments we did have happiness or joy last year. So I think that, interestingly, the two things that Rent the Runway was based on, this kind of buy less stuff and experiences are more important than ownership, the pandemic has made those two themes be even more resonant. So I think we're entering a period of time where the consumer value set has never been more aligned with the product that we've been building.
Right. And I wanted to also, Jen, share with you. So, we do a fair bit of work in the luxury industry, not just fashion, but generally the luxury goods industry. And we've been, studying and examining how meanings around luxury are changing, over the last 18 months. One of the first signals we saw in the first 4 or 5 months of the pandemic was one major shift, which actually revolved around luxury being associated with certain items that one could acquire that would sort of proxy as an experience. Let me put it that way. So, as an example, better quality furniture. So well-designed furniture that would proxy as an experience, original art, designer handbags, higher-end watches, and clothing as well was part of that, but less so, but certainly part of that. But one of the things that we learned studying this was that the pandemic has also done, or is certainly driving, one interesting change, which is that a lot of the things that maybe we previously considered to be sort of disposable, as consumers, we've been so spoiled being able to order a couch and then dispose off of it a year later and order another one, that a lot of the things that we thought were disposable are slowly, are the areas where there's slow change happening, but the change, pandemic is one of those situations where it accelerates that change. And that new meaning is kind of interesting because suddenly there's also this parallel path of interest in wanting to acquire some of these goods. But because the good kind of proxies as an experience. I'm just curious if that rings a bell to you, or if you've already seen some of that in your business as well.
So I actually slightly disagree with that for two reasons. I think that what you're saying is true amongst the 1%. So for people whose wealth increased dramatically over this period of time, they have spent their years, because they couldn't spend their money on travel, experiences, restaurants, other things, they have spent their year upgrading objects, especially the objects that they see in and out of their homes every single day. So I was with a friend recently who runs a company in the home repair space. And they said that while the first few weeks of the pandemic were kind of a dead halt in bookings, after that, people immediately decided to upgrade their barbecue outside and get a amazing pizza oven and make sure they had the largest TV that was mounted on their wall, and that they were moving into the kind of bigger couch. But that was really amongst wealthy people. I think that the bigger change is not going to be ownership as a proxy for experience. I think the bigger change is kind of a hybrid life that we're moving into. So if we look at the 99% of the population whose wealth and incomes did not go up during COVID, the one thing that did change is their relationship to their job and how that job will require them to show up in the future. So we know that close to 70% of businesses who have reported this have reported that they're re-entering into a hybrid mode of work where they're not going to require their employees to be at the office 5 days a week. Okay, what I see this as being is a period of time where people who don't have kids could spend almost a decade living a more nomadic lifestyle where you could actually move to the mountains in the winter and ski and work from there, or move to a warmer climate in the summer, or just experience more cultures around the world and kind of live and work from anywhere. I think that there's going to be far less permanence in the home and in the closet in the future, and that we're going to be catering to a segment of customers, especially millennials and Gen Z, who are more mobile, who are more nomadic, who actually need their wherever they're living at the time and whatever closet they happen to have at the time to actually adapt to them to wherever they're moving. So I think that the hybrid way of working is going to change everything. It's going to change dating. Okay, think about how the majority of people over the last few decades have met their significant other at work.
Yeah.
Okay, now if you're not going to be coming into the office as much, like you're going to have to meet that person in your local community, which probably is going to further accelerate kind of dating apps in an even bigger way than they have been in the past. Like, so I just think that this hybrid work thing is more about it's not just about the office, it's about literally every single facet of how we live. I think about myself. I am our company is only going to require people to physically come back into an office 2 days a week on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And we will spend time on those days being very intentional about our creativity and doing things together in person that are more difficult to do remotely. But the rest of the time, people could be wherever they want. So we've actually had employees move quite far away, because if you're only required to be in the office 2 days a week, you could legitimately fly into New York City on a Tuesday morning and leave Wednesday, evening, and you're fine. But for me, where I will continue to live in New York City, those other 3 days of the week, now it's not a pandemic time. I'm not going to be sheltered at home. I'm probably going to have lunch at a restaurant in my local neighborhood more often. I'm going to grab coffee at a local coffee shop. I'm going to engage in my local community in a way that I never had the time to do before. So that is going to help, I think, a lot of local businesses all over the country and all over the world as people kind of move into kind of this hybrid lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I mean, we just wrapped up this big study on the future of tourism. And one of the biggest things that was emerging out of that is local immersion, partly because people didn't want to take the chance of going everywhere, but also partly because this was an opportunity to discover things that they took for granted in the past. Hey, I didn't know there was this amazing bakery down the street, or, had no idea I could drive an hour into this incredible place and have a picnic with my family, and kind of the rediscovery of, I guess, the smaller joys in life.
Well, I think that local immersion also takes time. Think about how crazed our lifestyles have been over the past few decades in terms of the hours per day that we spend working.
Yeah.
And in the US in particular, people have very few vacation days. So they're having on average 2 to 3 weeks of vacation per year. And when you take that vacation, you really are just zonked out. You're just going to go to that beach vacation and you're literally going to sit there and drink some margaritas and maybe read a book.
Yeah.
But if you have a lifestyle that has more work-life balance, where you're not having to show up in an office every single day at 9 and leave at 6, and you have the ability to go to a location and actually stay there for maybe 4 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, like, of course, you're going to immerse yourself even more in what that place is. So I think the nature of what does a vacation mean is actually going to change dramatically because of this. And that's really exciting. So a lot of what I think Airbnb has been uh, really evangelizing over the last 10 years, I think just like this is, I think, the very best time to be running Rent the Runway. This is the very best time to be running Airbnb. Like this idea of live like a local, like that's exactly what everyone wants. And we're finally going to have the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting thing, just coming back to the discussion about sort of luxury and about being able to move around. I think one of the things that also relates to this is just how organizations think about work in general, not just in terms of where people work, but also how people work.
Yeah.
And I think, it's really interesting because Jenn, when we started our company, one of the first things people would ask us is, "Where's your office?" And we would say, "We don't have an office." Our employees are all over the world. We actually don't have an office other than being legally headquartered in Canada. We don't have an office. And I remember in the first year, people would look at us as if we are some sort of fake company. One person in a meeting made a joke saying, "Oh, you're a virtual company," as if to imply that we don't exist. And how much things have changed 5 years hence, where this is seen as sort of the only way, or one of the most common ways to work now. I think it's just really interesting that sometimes good change also comes out of some horrible circumstances. Obviously, not to undermine the tragedy and the difficulty people have had, but sometimes good change also comes out of it.
Well, I think that this tragedy that we have experienced is uh, going to change everything more than anything else that we've ever lived through. Like if you are living today, like you've really never lived through something that will change society as much as the pandemic. And I do not think that we are returning at all to a 2019 world. This is an entirely new world. The customer is in a completely different mindset. They're reevaluating every single part of how they spend their time and their money. And businesses that don't evolve rapidly to meet the customer where she is today are going to see even quicker declines.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of adaptability, the one question or the one topic I have to talk about with you is obviously sustainability and circularity. Um, Obviously, it's a part of your business. We're certainly in a circumstance where I would say out of the 130 odd clients we have, 90% of them now have board mandates with set goals, 2025, 2030, 2035. And a lot of the goals look at sustainability as a cost center, as a thing we must do, nobody thinks about it, or at least I shouldn't say nobody, but it's a handful of people that really think about it as an opportunity. So I was just really curious to hear about how that issue kind of circulates in your mind and within your organization as well.
Yeah, so I've touched upon kind of the first reason I started the business, which was my deep-seated belief in experiences over ownership. The second reason I started the business is I am a recovering shopaholic, and I have recognized that the entire fashion industry was unsustainable. The business model of the fashion industry is unsustainable. So, what I mean by that is every brand and every retailer, no matter who you are, the way that you make money is convincing the customer to buy something that she doesn't need. You're convincing her to buy an 11th pair of jeans. You're convincing her to buy the 15th top. You're convincing her that the old tops went out of style. The reality is that our business is trying to say to the customer, buy less stuff and access more. So we are attacking the central premise that makes the industry so pollutive. The reason why the fashion industry is the second most pollutive industry on earth is that 80% of that pollution comes from clothing manufacturing all these things that people just don't use.
Mhm.
So, by nature of creating the world's largest shared closet, we're fundamentally transforming the industry to be more sustainable. So, I think that the issue with sustainability is that businesses think about sustainability on the margins. They think about what are the things that we can do, like throughout our business to enhance sustainability in area A or area B, as opposed to, in many cases, attacking the central model, the business model, which in many cases is unsustainable because it's based around this idea of continuous consumption.
Right. Right. I think obviously in your case, technology has been a central part of your business. But what would you say to organizations that now have to, I guess, think about technology because it's traditionally not been part of their business? For example, a CPG company that has traditionally gone to market with, the grocery retail chains of the world, and now has to think about sustainability and kind of it puts a different lens onto how they think about their business. And one of the challenges is that the technology is seen as a somehow an add-on that will solve all the problems, if that makes sense. And I think one of the questions we're trying to get organizations to constantly ask is why, right? If you're introducing a certain piece of technology, whether it's going direct to consumer or something in the supply chain, what does it really mean, and why is that relevant to the consumer? And oftentimes we find that a lot of the obvious, band-aid solutions don't exactly point in the direction of really viable alternatives to existing business models. I'm just curious, obviously you sit on the board of some other companies. How do you advise them on issues such as these where, they're trying to find quick band-aid solves from other companies that are doing stuff like this?
I I think that it takes a really deep exploration of how the customer is changing and how the channels are changing. So you mentioned that, you know, lots of companies view technology as being kind of a band-aid solution. I think that what I would be thinking about if I were a CPG is I would think about the fact that my customer used to buy me potentially at a supermarket, in a grocery aisle, at a CVS, where they were at least visually understanding what the product was. And now they're in a user interface, maybe on Amazon, where the personalization algorithm is directing them towards whatever that CPG product is. They don't have the same sort of familiarity with the brand. So how could I use technology not only to create an equal experience to what my analog experience used to be, but how can I use technology to create an even deeper connection with the customer, whether it's directly through my own channels or whether it's through other kind of third-party channels where she may be consuming the brand. So one of the things that I was seeing prior to the pandemic in China was how grocery was fundamentally using technology to transform by nature of using blockchain technology to give the consumer the ability to understand where that egg was actually from, what farm it was sourced from, how it traveled to get to their home. Like, you had this transparent information on every product that you were eating. And that was actually changing your relationship to how you consume food, but it was also changing your relationship to the store that you were buying that food from. So just thinking about, like, what are the ways that you can use technology to create an even better experience? Because there's many. Technology can actually create a way more luxurious experience than the experience that you used to have in a department store. So I think about beauty. Like, you used to go to a counter in a department store, you'd wait half an hour to talk to someone and they'd finally be able to give you some advice. You didn't know whether they were being commissioned on what they were selling you. Now there's so many different ways to use technology to have virtual styling, live streaming, virtual sampling, tools that are actually making a much more luxurious experience. So I think using it as an unlock to further the customer experience is really the most important thing that you can do.
Jenn, I know we're almost at time. I have one final question for you. Since we started this conversation talking about meaning, I was just curious, is there something about your business that you think people often either misunderstand or, the part of Rent the Runway maybe that is least recognized? Is there something that you think you would like people to know about Rent the Runway?
I think that the real reason why people are loyal to Rent the Runway is because Rent the Runway enables you to discover new sides of yourself. Having freedom to access an unlimited closet allows me to try things and be new parts of me that I felt like I couldn't be before when I had to make that rational choice. And it deepens my relationship, in a sense, with myself. And that's why she loves the product, because it enables broader and deeper self-expression. And it fundamentally changes her relationship with fashion forever. Fashion becomes a way more important part of her life because of Rent the Runway. Because she tries all this stuff, she falls in love with things she didn't think she was going to fall in love with. She comes to us she comes to us mostly for rational reasons initially. And she stays with us for emotional reasons. And that's a really powerful place to be, where you can change her relationship with fashion by nature of changing that kind of ability to self-express. So that is the thing that keeps me so incredibly motivated to build and run Rent the Runway, that I know that we're changing this daily act of someone getting dressed and how they feel and what their mood is that day.
I love that, Jenn, because every brand and product should learn from that statement, because ultimately everybody should be trying to better understand the role they play in helping the consumer and helping people better understand themselves, and helping people better feel more comfortable in being who they are, and exploring parts of themselves that they don't get an opportunity to do. That's incredible. Jenn, thank you so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun. I mean, I could go on chatting with you for hours, but Obviously, you have better things to do. We really appreciate you joining us, and we hope we will talk again sometime in the future.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jenn.